Admiral Marcus Vale stood quietly on the bridge of his massive warship, the Sovereign's Might. The stars outside looked the same as they always did, cold, distant, and endless. He had been doing these patrol runs for 20 years now, and nothing ever happened out here in the empty space near the border zones. The bridge was calm and quiet. His crew worked at their stations with practiced ease. Lieutenant Emma Clark monitored the sensor readings while Commander James Hayes reviewed the patrol reports. Everything was normal, just another boring day in the void between star systems. "Sir, are you seeing this?" Lieutenant Clark's voice cut through the silence, sharp with confusion. Admiral Vale turned toward her station. Clark was staring at her screens with wide eyes, her fingers dancing across the controls as if she couldn't believe what she was reading. "What is it, Lieutenant?" Vale asked, walking over to look at her displays. "I'm getting massive energy readings from Sector 7. The sensors are going crazy." She looked up at him with worry in her eyes. "Sir, I've never seen anything like this before." Commander Hayes hurried over from his station. "Show us on the main screen." The large display at the front of the bridge flickered to life. At first, there was nothing but empty space and distant stars. Then slowly, reality seemed to twist and bend in one small area. Space itself was warping, creating a dark spiral that grew larger by the second. "What in the name of the Empire is that?" Hayes whispered. The spiral grew bigger and bigger, pulling at the fabric of space around it. Strange lights danced around the edges, colors that didn't seem natural. The entire bridge crew stopped what they were doing to stare at the impossible sight. "All ships, report in," Admiral Vale ordered, his voice steady despite the fear growing in his chest. One by one, the other ships in his fleet confirmed they were seeing the same thing. The captains sounded as confused and worried as Vale felt. In all their years of service, none of them had ever encountered anything like this. Suddenly, something began to emerge from the swirling darkness. At first, it was just a shadow, but slowly a shape became clear. It was a ship, but unlike any vessel in the Imperial database. Where Imperial ships were round and bulky, this one was sharp and angular. Where their hulls were smooth, this one had strange ridges and patterns that seemed to serve no purpose they could understand. "Size estimate?" Vale asked, though he could already tell it was big. "It's massive, sir," Clark replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Larger than our heavy cruisers, but smaller than a dreadnought. The energy signature though." She paused, checking her readings again. "Sir, the power output from that ship is impossible. It's generating more energy than our entire battle group combined." The strange vessel continued to emerge from what looked like a tear in space itself. As it fully cleared the portal, the swirling darkness began to collapse behind it, folding in on itself until nothing remained but empty space and stars. Commander Hayes was frantically working at his station, trying to identify the unknown ship. "No matches in any database, sir. The hull material isn't anything we've seen before. The design doesn't match any known civilization." "Could it be from beyond the rim?" Vale asked. "Something from outside known space?" "Maybe, sir. But how did it get here? That wasn't a jump drive signature. Our sensors couldn't even track how it arrived." Admiral Vale stared at the mysterious ship hanging motionless in space before them. In 30 years of military service, he had encountered pirates, rebels, and hostile alien species. But this was different. This ship represented something completely unknown, something that challenged everything they thought they knew about their corner of the galaxy. "Distance?" he asked. 50,000 kilometers and holding position, Clark reported. The ship made no aggressive moves. It simply sat in space, silent and waiting. There were no visible weapons, though Vale was certain they were there. Something about the vessel's design suggested it was built for war, despite its sleek appearance. "Energy levels are stable, sir," Hayes reported. "Whatever their power source is, it's incredibly efficient. I'm not detecting any waste heat or radiation leakage." Vale felt a chill run down his spine. The Empire's ships were powerful, but they were also inefficient. Maintaining a battle group required constant energy management and careful resource allocation. This unknown vessel seemed to generate enormous power without any of the usual problems. "Sir, should we hail them?" Lieutenant Clark asked. Vale considered the question carefully. First contact protocols existed for situations like this, but they were written assuming the unknown party would be less advanced than the Empire. The energy readings from this ship suggested that assumption might be dangerously wrong. "Maintain distance," he ordered. "Continue scanning. I want to know everything about that ship before we make contact." The bridge fell quiet except for the soft hum of electronics and the occasional beep from the sensor stations. Every member of the crew kept glancing at the main screen, where the mysterious vessel waited in the darkness of space. Admiral Vale had spent his entire career believing the Empire was the dominant force in this region of space. They had the largest ships, the most advanced technology, and the strongest military. But as he stared at the alien vessel before him, he began to suspect that everything was about to change. The ship's very presence raised uncomfortable questions. How had an unknown civilization developed such advanced technology without the Empire noticing? How many more ships like this one existed? And most importantly, what did they want? For the first time in decades, Admiral Marcus Vale felt truly uncertain about the future. The arrival of this single vessel had shattered his understanding of the galaxy, and he had the growing feeling that things would never be the same again. Admiral Vale took a deep breath and straightened his uniform. After 30 minutes of studying the mysterious ship, he knew they couldn't wait any longer. The vessel just sat there in space, silent and patient, like it was waiting for something. "Lieutenant Clark, open all communication channels," he ordered. "Use every frequency we have. Broadcast in Imperial Standard, then cycle through all known galactic languages." Clark's fingers moved quickly across her control panel. "All channels open, sir. Broadcasting now." Vale stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spoken for the Empire many times before. "Unknown vessel, this is Admiral Marcus Vale of the Terran Imperial Navy, 3rd Fleet. You have entered Imperial space without permission. Please identify yourself and state your purpose." The bridge fell completely silent. Everyone waited, listening for any response. Seconds passed, then minutes. The only sounds were the quiet hums and beeps of the ship's systems. "Try the old trade languages," Commander Hayes suggested. "Maybe they're from the outer colonies." Clark switched frequencies and tried again. Still nothing. She worked through a dozen different languages, each attempt met with the same empty silence. "Sir, maybe their communication systems are different from ours," she said hopefully. Before Admiral Vale could respond, the silence was broken by a clear, crisp voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "This is Captain William Cross of the United Earth Defense Force vessel Defiant. Admiral Vale, you are currently in violation of human territorial boundaries." The entire bridge crew froze. The voice had spoken in perfect Imperial Standard, with no accent or strange pronunciation. Whoever this Captain Cross was, he knew their language better than most Imperial citizens. Commander Hayes was the first to recover from the shock. "Human," he whispered. "But there are no human colonies in this sector." Admiral Vale found his voice again. "Captain Cross, our star charts show this region as uninhabited space. There are no recorded human settlements within 50 light-years of this position." A soft laugh came through the communication system. "Admiral, I'm afraid your charts are quite out of date. I'm transmitting our current territorial maps for your review." Lieutenant Clark looked up from her station with confusion written across her face. "Sir, I'm receiving a data package. Should I display it?" "Put it on the main screen," Vale ordered. What appeared before them changed everything they thought they knew about this region of space. The display showed dozens of star systems, each one marked with human symbols and classifications. Mining operations, colonies, defense platforms, and shipyards were scattered across an area larger than 3 Imperial sectors. "This is impossible," Commander Hayes said, his voice barely audible. "We've surveyed this entire region. There's nothing here but empty systems and dead worlds." Captain Cross's voice remained calm and professional. "Commander, your surveys were conducted along predictable routes using standard Imperial protocols. We simply made sure to stay out of your way." Admiral Vale stared at the map, trying to process what he was seeing. According to this data, humans had been building a civilization right under the Empire's nose for decades. "How long have you been out here?" he asked. "Long enough to establish ourselves properly," Cross replied. "We prefer to be well prepared before announcing our presence." Lieutenant Clark was studying her sensor readings with growing alarm. "Sir, I'm detecting massive energy signatures from several of these marked systems. Whatever they've built out there, it's big." Vale felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. The Empire prided itself on knowing everything that happened in their territory and beyond. The idea that an entire human civilization had been growing and expanding without their knowledge was terrifying. "Captain Cross," he said carefully, "the Empire has no record of human expansion into this region. How do you explain this oversight?" There was a pause before Cross answered. "Admiral, with respect, The Empire sees what it expects to see. You look for threats that match your understanding of technology and tactics. You don't look for civilizations that choose to remain hidden. Commander Hayes was working frantically at his station, trying to verify the information they had received. Sir, long-range sensors are confirming artificial structures in at least 12 of these systems. How did we miss this? Because they wanted you to miss it, Vale said quietly, the truth beginning to dawn on him. Captain Cross seemed to hear his realization. The Empire is not the only power in this galaxy, Admiral. There are others who prefer to grow strong before revealing themselves to potential enemies. Are you calling the Empire your enemy? Vale asked, his hand unconsciously moving toward his weapon controls. That depends entirely on what happens next, Cross replied. We have no desire for conflict, but we also have no intention of submitting to Imperial authority. We've worked too hard to build what we have. Lieutenant Clark looked up from her station with wide eyes. Sir, I'm detecting movement from their ship. Energy levels are increasing. Admiral Vale watched as the sleek vessel began to glow with a soft blue light. It was still holding position, but something had definitely changed. Captain Cross, are you powering weapons? Just making sure you understand that we're prepared for any eventuality, Cross answered smoothly. We've been watching the Empire for a long time, Admiral. We know how you handle first contact situations. The weight of the situation pressed down on Vale like a physical force. The Empire had procedures for dealing with unknown civilizations, but those procedures assumed Imperial superiority. They assumed that any new contact would be with a less advanced species that could be easily controlled or conquered. Looking at the energy readings from the human ship, and thinking about the massive infrastructure hidden throughout the region, Admiral Vale realized that all of their assumptions might be dangerously wrong. For the first time in his career, he was facing a situation where the Empire might not hold all the advantages. The galaxy had just become a much more complicated place. Admiral Vale stared at the energy readings coming from the human ship. The vessel called Defiant was glowing brighter now, and his instruments showed power levels that shouldn't be possible for a ship that size. He had to make a decision, and he had to make it quickly. Commander Hayes, he said quietly, what's our standard procedure for non-compliant vessels? Hayes looked uncomfortable. Sir, normally we would escort them to the nearest Imperial base for processing and identification. Vale nodded. That was exactly what he had been thinking. The Empire had rules about unknown ships in their territory, and those rules didn't allow for exceptions. Even if these humans claimed this was their space, they still needed to follow proper protocols. Captain Cross, Vale said into the communication system, I'm afraid you'll need to accompany us to Starbase 7 for proper identification and registration procedures. The response came immediately. I'm sorry, Admiral, but that won't be possible. We have our own protocols to follow. Commander Hayes stepped closer to Vale. Sir, they are refusing a direct order from an Imperial Admiral. That's an act of defiance. Vale felt the weight of command pressing on his shoulders. He had given hundreds of orders like this before, and they had always been followed. Ships that refused Imperial escorts were usually pirates or smugglers, and they never had ships this advanced. Captain Cross, this is not a request, he said firmly. You will comply with Imperial regulations or face the consequences. Lieutenant Clark looked up from her station. Sir, should I signal the other ships to take escort positions? Do it, Vale ordered. Across the communication channels, Vale's voice reached the other ships in his battle group. All vessels, assume standard escort formation around the unknown ship. Prepare containment procedures. The Imperial ships began to move, their massive hulls turning slowly through space. The heavy cruiser Thunder moved to the human ship's left side, while the destroyer Sharp Edge took position on the right. 2 more destroyers moved to block any escape routes. Captain Cross's voice came through the speakers again, still calm and polite. Admiral, I strongly advise against this course of action. The decision has been made, Vale replied. Commander Hayes, prepare a warning shot. Target their engines with containment torpedoes. Hayes hesitated for just a moment. Sir, are you sure? We don't know what their defensive capabilities are. They're one ship against an entire battle group, Vale said. Fire the torpedoes. The Sovereigns might launch 6 containment torpedoes, designed to disable a ship's engines without destroying the vessel. These were standard Imperial weapons, used hundreds of times in similar situations. They moved through space in perfect formation, their tracking systems locked onto the human ship's engine section. What happened next made everyone on the bridge question everything they thought they knew about space combat. The human ship didn't try to dodge or run. Instead, dozens of small weapons appeared along its hull, weapons so tiny that the Imperial sensors had missed them completely. These point defense systems opened fire with incredible precision. The containment torpedoes, each one the size of a small shuttle, simply vanished. They were destroyed so quickly and completely that the weapon sensors could barely track what had happened. Not one torpedo got within 5 kilometers of the human ship. What just happened? Lieutenant Clark asked, her voice filled with shock. Commander Hayes was frantically checking his instruments. Sir, their point defense systems are unlike anything in our database. The reaction time was impossible. No computer should be able to track and destroy targets moving that fast. Admiral Vale felt ice forming in his chest. The Empire's containment torpedoes were designed to be nearly impossible to stop. They were fast, small, and equipped with advanced jamming systems. The fact that this single human ship had destroyed all 6 without any apparent effort was terrifying. Captain Cross, he said into the communication system, that was an impressive defensive display. Thank you, Admiral. Would you like to see what our offensive capabilities look like? Before Vale could answer, Commander Hayes spoke up urgently. Sir, the heavy cruiser Thunder is requesting permission to fire a warning shot with their main cannon. Vale thought quickly. The Thunder's main cannon was designed to crack the surface of small moons. If the human ship could handle that kind of firepower, then they were dealing with something far beyond Imperial technology. Permission granted, he said. Tell Captain Johnson to fire across their bow. The Thunder turned slowly, bringing its massive main weapon to bear. The cannon charged for several seconds, building up the enormous energy needed for a full power shot. Then it fired. The beam that lanced through space was brighter than a small star. It was the kind of weapon that had won wars for the Empire, the kind of weapon that made other civilizations surrender rather than face its power. The beam struck the human ship's shields and simply disappeared. There was no explosion, no flash of overloaded energy, no sign of strain on the alien vessel. The most powerful weapon in the Imperial arsenal had been absorbed as easily as a gentle breeze. Impossible, Hayes whispered. Captain Cross's voice came through the speakers, still maddeningly calm. Admiral, I believe a demonstration of good faith is in order. A single, thin beam of light shot out from the human ship. It traveled across 50,000 kilometers of space in an instant and struck a small asteroid that was drifting near the edge of the system. The asteroid simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not broken apart, but completely vaporized down to its basic atoms. The precision was perfect, the power overwhelming. The bridge of the Sovereign's might fell completely silent. Every person there understood what they had just witnessed. The human ship had casually destroyed a target at a distance that would challenge the Empire's best gunners, using what appeared to be a fraction of its actual firepower. Admiral Vale realized that everything had changed. The Empire's age of military dominance was over, ended by a single demonstration from a ship they had never seen coming. For the first time in Imperial history, an entire battle group began to retreat from a single enemy vessel. Admiral Vale sat alone in his private quarters aboard the Sovereign's Might, staring at reports that made no sense. 3 hours had passed since the human ship had demonstrated its impossible capabilities, and his intelligence officers were working around the clock to find answers. A soft chime indicated someone was requesting entry. Come in, he called. Commander Hayes entered, carrying a datapad and wearing an expression that Vale had never seen before. The man looked like he had aged 10 years in the past few hours. Sir, you need to see this, Hayes said, his voice barely above a whisper. Vale gestured to the chair across from his desk. What did you find? Hayes sat down heavily and activated the datapad. We sent our fastest scout ships to conduct emergency reconnaissance of the systems marked on the human territorial maps. What they found. He paused, struggling to find the right words. Sir, we've been blind fools. The datapad projected a 3-dimensional star map above Vale's desk. Dozens of systems glowed with different colored markers, each one representing a different type of human installation. This system here, Hayes pointed to a red marker, has orbital shipyards that are larger than anything we've ever built. They could construct 100 ships the size of our heavy cruisers at the same time. Vale leaned forward, studying the display. How could we miss something that big? Because they didn't want us to see it, Hayes replied. Every installation is equipped with advanced stealth technology. Our scout ships only detected them when they got within a few thousand kilometers. Hayes switched to another system, this one marked in blue. Mining operations here are pulling resources from 12 different asteroid belts simultaneously. The amount of raw materials they are processing is enormous. How enormous? Vale asked, though he was beginning to fear the answer. Enough to build and maintain a fleet that would make our entire navy look like a patrol squadron, Hayes said quietly. Vale felt his stomach drop. The Empire's military strength came from their industrial capacity and their control of key resource systems. If humans had been secretly building an industrial base this large, then the balance of power in this entire region of space had already shifted. Show me the defense installations, he ordered. Hayes touched the datapad, and several systems lit up with yellow markers. These are what our scouts are calling fortress worlds. Each one has orbital defense platforms that make our star bases look primitive. The holographic display zoomed in on one of the fortress worlds, showing a planet surrounded by massive space stations. Energy readings indicated weapons powerful enough to destroy entire fleets. How many ships do they have? Vale asked. Hayes looked down at his datapad, checking the numbers again as if he hoped they might have changed. Conservative estimate? At least 300 vessels of similar or superior capability to the Defiant. 300. Vale's voice cracked slightly. That's just what we could confirm, sir. Our scouts detected shipyard activity that suggests they're building more all the time. Vale stood up and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, hidden among those distant lights, was a human civilization that had been preparing for this moment for decades. How long have they been doing this? He asked. Based on the construction patterns and the age of some installations, we estimate at least 50 years. Maybe longer. 50 years. Vale thought about what the Empire had been doing for the past 50 years. Mostly routine patrols, small conflicts with pirates and rebels, and slow expansion into what they thought was empty space. Meanwhile, the humans had been building the foundation of a military superpower. There's more, sir, Hayes said reluctantly. Vale turned back to face his second-in-command. More? The scout ships detected multiple fleet formations conducting training exercises in several systems. Large formations, sir. It appears they have organized battle groups that are larger and more advanced than anything in our navy. The admiral sat back down, feeling the weight of command pressing down on him like never before. What about their technology? How advanced are they really? Hayes activated another section of the datapad. Our analysis of the demonstration we witnessed suggests they're operating on principles we don't fully understand. Their power generation, their weapons, their shields, everything is beyond our current capabilities. How far beyond? Vale asked. Conservatively? 20 to 30 years ahead of us. Possibly more. Vale closed his eyes and tried to process the information. The Empire had built its power on the assumption that they were the most advanced civilization in their region of space. They had better weapons, better ships, and better training than anyone else they had encountered. Sir, Hayes continued, there's one more thing. The scout ships detected communication traffic between the human systems. They're not just scattered colonies, they're a unified civilization with central command and coordination. Military command? Yes, sir. And based on the communication patterns, they've been monitoring our activities for years. They know our patrol routes, our base locations, our fleet strengths. Vale opened his eyes and stared at the star map still glowing above his desk. They've been watching us. While we've been completely unaware of them, Hayes confirmed. The implications were staggering. Every imperial strategy, every military plan, every assumption about regional security was based on incomplete information. The humans knew everything about the Empire, while the Empire knew nothing about the humans. What's the recommendation from intelligence? Vale asked. Hayes hesitated before answering. Sir, the consensus is that we're facing a peer military power. Possibly a superior one. For the first time in his 30-year career, Admiral Marcus Vale faced the possibility that the Empire might not be able to dictate terms to a potential enemy. The humans weren't raiders or rebels who could be crushed with superior firepower. They were a fully developed civilization with the industrial capacity and military strength to defend themselves. Get me a secure channel to High Command, Vale ordered. Everything has changed, and they need to know immediately. As Hayes left to carry out his orders, Vale remained alone with the glowing star map and the uncomfortable realization that the galaxy was no longer the simple place he had thought it was. 3 days had passed since Admiral Vale's urgent message reached Imperial High Command. The response had been swift and direct: negotiate, don't fight. The reports from his scouts had convinced the Empire's leadership that a military solution was not possible. Now Vale stood in the main conference room of his flagship, waiting for what might be the most important meeting of his career. The room had been prepared according to diplomatic protocols, though he wondered if those protocols meant anything when dealing with humans who had been secretly preparing for this moment for decades. "Sir, incoming transmission from the human vessel," Lieutenant Clark announced from the communication station. "Put them through," Vale ordered. The holographic projectors activated, and 3 figures materialized in the center of the room. The middle figure was Captain William Cross, still wearing the same calm expression that had infuriated Vale during their first encounter. To his left stood a woman with Admiral's insignia, and to his right was a man in what appeared to be Army uniform. "Admiral Vale," Captain Cross said with a slight nod. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Allow me to introduce Admiral Rebecca Stone, Commander of the 3rd Human Defense Fleet, and General David Mitchell, Head of Colonial Security Operations." Vale straightened his uniform and stepped forward. "Captain Cross, Admiral Stone, General Mitchell. The Empire is prepared to discuss the current situation and establish proper diplomatic relations." Admiral Stone took a step forward, her expression serious but not hostile. "Admiral Vale, before we begin, I want you to understand something important. We've been aware of the Empire's existence for quite some time." "How long?" Vale asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer wouldn't be pleasant. 62 years, General Mitchell replied. "We detected your expansion patterns when you first moved into the outer systems. We've been monitoring your activities ever since." Commander Hayes, standing beside Vale, couldn't hide his shock. "You've been watching us for over 60 years. Admiral Stone nodded. "We learned early in our history that survival depends on preparation. When we discovered a large, expanding military power in our region of space, we decided that contact was inevitable. We chose to prepare for that contact from a position of strength." Vale felt a chill run through him. "What kind of preparation?" Captain Cross gestured, and the holographic display changed to show a detailed tactical analysis. "We studied your military doctrine, your technology, your expansion patterns, and your diplomatic history. We learned how the Empire handles first contact with new civilizations." The display showed records of previous Imperial encounters with unknown species. Most had ended with the newcomers becoming Imperial subjects or being driven from their territories. None had ended with the Empire accepting a peer power. "Based on what we learned," Admiral Stone continued, "we concluded that the Empire would only respect strength. So we built strength." General Mitchell stepped forward, his expression hard. "Human history taught us a valuable lesson, Admiral. Never again would we be caught unprepared or outgunned when facing a potential enemy." Vale studied the 3 human officers, trying to read their intentions. "Are you saying you consider the Empire your enemy?" "That depends entirely on what happens next," Captain Cross replied. "We have no desire for conquest or conflict. We simply want to exist in peace and develop our civilization without interference." Commander Hayes looked at the tactical displays still floating in the room. "If you've been preparing for 60 years, what exactly have you built?" The holographic display shifted again, showing the full extent of human space. The number of systems, installations, and military assets was staggering. Vale realized that the reconnaissance his scouts had conducted had only scratched the surface. "We've built everything necessary to defend ourselves," Admiral Stone said simply. "Shipyards, fortifications, supply lines, and yes, a fleet capable of matching anything the Empire might send against us." Vale took a deep breath, knowing his next words would shape the future of this entire region of space. "What are you proposing?" Captain Cross stepped forward. "Recognition of human sovereignty over our claimed territories, establishment of formal diplomatic relations, and mutual respect for each other's borders." "And if the Empire refuses?" Vale asked. General Mitchell's expression didn't change. "Then you'll discover why the rest of the galaxy should fear human engineering." The threat was delivered calmly, without anger or hostility, which somehow made it more frightening. These humans weren't emotional or aggressive, they were simply prepared for any outcome. Admiral Stone seemed to sense Vale's thoughts. "Admiral, we're not looking for a fight. We're offering partnership between equals. The galaxy is large enough for both our civilizations to prosper." Vale looked around the room at his officers. Commander Hayes was studying the tactical displays with obvious concern. Lieutenant Clark was monitoring the communication systems, her face pale with worry. Everyone could see that the old assumptions about Imperial dominance no longer applied. "I'll need to consult with High Command," Vale said finally. "Of course," Captain Cross replied. "But Admiral, I should mention that we're not the only ones watching this situation. Other civilizations in neighboring regions are very interested in how the Empire handles the discovery of a peer power. The implication was clear. How the Empire responded to the humans would be watched by every other species in the galaxy. Any sign of imperial weakness might encourage others to challenge their authority. Vale made his decision. On behalf of the Terran Empire, I officially recognize human sovereignty over your claimed territories and request the establishment of formal diplomatic relations. Captain Cross smiled for the first time since Vale had met him. Admiral, welcome to the new galaxy. I think you'll find it much more interesting than the old one. As the human officers ended the transmission, Vale remained in the conference room, staring at the space where they had stood. The Empire's age of unchallenged dominance was over, ended not by conquest or defeat, but by the simple reality that they were no longer alone at the top. The galaxy had two major powers now, and everything would have to change to accommodate that new reality.